Procrastination is the act of delaying or postponing something, and in this video, we're breaking down a helpful TED Talk about the mind of procrastinators, or people who procrastinate. Let's learn some advanced English vocabulary as we find out what's so different about a procrastinator's brain and why it affects their ability to get things done. First, we'll watch part of the clip with subtitles.
Now, I had a hypothesis that the brains of procrastinators were actually different than the brains of other people. So here's the brain of a non-procrastinator. Now, here's my brain. Both brains have a rational decision maker in them, but the procrastinator's brain also has an instant gratification monkey. So the rational decision maker will make the rational decision to do something productive, but the monkey doesn't like that plan. And he says, actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of the Nancy Kerrigan-Tanya Harding scandal, because I just remembered that happened. The instant gratification monkey does not seem like a guy you want behind the wheel. He lives entirely in the present moment. He only cares about two things: easy and fun.
Now, let's break down each line and also watch the rest of the clip.
Now, I had a hypothesis that the brains of procrastinators were actually different than the brains of other people.
A hypothesis is an idea or explanation that can be tested by experimenting and studying. For instance, I have a hypothesis that the water is cleaner in Florida compared to California. Let's test the water from both places to see if my hypothesis is correct. Hypothesis is a more technical scientific term. In everyday conversations, people will typically say theory instead. For instance, my theory is that the business will close in a few months. And we briefly defined procrastination at the beginning of this video, the act of delaying or postponing something. So a procrastinator is a person who procrastinates. So if you get a deadline at work or school and you choose to wait until the last minute to get it done, you're a procrastinator.
Now, I had a hypothesis that the brains of procrastinators were actually different than the brains of other people. So here's the brain of a non-procrastinator.
Non is a prefix that means absence or not there. So a non-procrastinator is someone who doesn't procrastinate. Another example is a non-aggressive dog, meaning the dog is not aggressive or harmful to others. So let's take a look at the brains of the procrastinator and non-procrastinator.
So here's the brain of a non-procrastinator. Now, here's my brain. Both brains have a rational decision maker in them, but the procrastinator's brain also has an instant gratification monkey.
When someone says you're rational, it means you make smart decisions based on logic. So next time someone asks you to make a rational decision, make sure to think about it logically and not emotionally. A decision is a conclusion or resolution reached after consideration, like, I'll make the decision soon about where I'm going to college. A synonym for decision is choice. For instance, you need to make a choice, chocolate or vanilla. Decision is used in slightly more serious situations, whereas choice can be used in everyday conversations. And a maker is a person or thing that produces something, like an ice cream maker makes ice cream, or a coffee maker makes coffee. So when you put it all together, a rational decision maker is a person who picks something based on a lot of logical thinking. As for instant gratification monkey, a synonym for instant is second. So when someone says they want something this instant, they want it as fast as possible. And gratification is a source of pleasure. It comes from the word gratitude. So you might feel gratification after your boss compliments you or you get a good grade on a test. So Tim isn't being literal here, but he's saying half of the procrastinator's brain makes well thought out decisions, and the other half only cares about happiness in that moment.
Both brains have a rational decision maker in them, but the procrastinator's brain also has an instant gratification monkey. So the rational decision maker will make the rational decision to do something productive, but the monkey doesn't like that plan.
When someone calls you productive, it means you do a lot of work. For instance, if you finish 4 reports in an hour and your coworker does 2, you're more productive. A plan is a detailed proposal for doing or achieving something. Like, we need to make a plan for the party. So Tim is saying here that half of a procrastinator's brain is trying to do something productive and work hard, and the other half isn't having it.
So the rational decision maker will make the rational decision to do something productive, but the monkey doesn't like that plan. And he says, actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of the Nancy Kerrigan-Tanya Harding scandal, because I just remembered that happened.
A scandal is an action or event that's morally or legally wrong and causes a lot of people to be upset about it. For instance, when Brad Pitt cheated on Jennifer Aniston, it was a huge scandal. So here, the Nancy Kerrigan-Tonya Harding scandal happened in 1994, right before the Winter Olympics. The ice skater Tonya Harding hired someone to injure her colleague Nancy Kerrigan's knee so she would have a better chance of winning an Olympic medal. Tim is using this specific example just to show how random thoughts or memories in a procrastinator's brain can affect how or when they get their work done.
And he says, actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of the Nancy Kerrigan-Tonya Harding scandal because I just remembered that happened. The instant gratification monkey does not seem like a guy you want behind the wheel.
Seem means to give the impression or sensation of being something. For instance, does this seem right to you? Or she seems sad today. And behind the wheel is a phrase that literally means to be behind the steering wheel of a vehicle. It's a more descriptive way to say you are driving. But here, Tim is using it metaphorically. There's not actually a steering wheel inside your head that a monkey is driving. We use behind the wheel as a common phrase that means to take control or charge of something. For instance, we want Mary behind the wheel for this project, meaning Mary will lead or be in charge of this project. So here, Tim is saying the instant gratification monkey is not the person you want in charge of making your decisions. Idioms and metaphors are used so often in everyday English, but when you're in the middle of a YouTube video or learning English with traditional apps and resources, it can be complicated to actually understand what these phrases mean and make it difficult for you to reach your true potential. This is why I recommend learning English with FluentU. On FluentU, you learn by watching authentic videos in English like movie scenes, TED Talks, and music videos that all have context-specific definitions in their interactive subtitles. So when you see an unfamiliar word, idiom, or metaphor, like in this TED Talk with the expression about to,
when I'm on set and we're about to shoot and the first AD calls out rolling,
you just click on it to see the exact definition along with real-world example videos.
Jim is about to prove his telekinetic powers, and he needs absolute silence.
After each video, you take a personalized quiz and answer speaking questions so you can actually practice your fluency and pronunciation. If you're serious about learning English, you can try FluentU for free by signing up for a 2-week trial using the link in the description below. Plus, FluentU is currently having a sale, so now's a great time to check it out.
The instant gratification monkey does not seem like a guy you want behind the wheel. He lives entirely in the present moment. He only cares about 2 things, easy and fun.
Entirely means completely or solely, like we have entirely different opinions about politics. You use past for things that happened before, future for things that will happen, and present or present moment for what's happening right now. So when you live entirely in the present moment, you aren't thinking about how this will affect you or others in the future. You just want to have fun right now.
He lives entirely in the present moment. He only cares about 2 things, easy and fun. How does the procrastinator ever get himself over here to this blue zone?
A zone is an area of land that has a specific purpose. Like a construction zone is a place where construction is happening, or a pedestrian zone is a place where only pedestrians or humans can be, no cars. So here, Tim is asking how does the procrastinator get over in the blue zone, which is the area on his screen that's labeled as hard things, since usually the procrastinator chooses to take the easy route to do things.
How does the procrastinator ever get himself over here to this blue zone? A less pleasant place, but where really important things happen.
When you describe something as pleasant, it's giving a sense of happiness or enjoyment. For instance, the beach is a pleasant place because it makes me really happy. The opposite of pleasant would be unpleasant, which causes unhappiness or discomfort. For instance, a swamp or dark cave is an unpleasant place. So Tim is saying even though the blue zone might not be as happy and fun, it's a really important place because it's where you get things done.
A less pleasant place, but where really important things happen. That the procrastinator has a guardian angel, someone called the panic monster.
Guardian angel is a phrase we use when there is something or someone guarding or protecting you. No, it doesn't actually have to be a heavenly being with a halo and wings. It can be a parent watching over you, or even something that's not real, like a panic monster. When you panic, you freak out about something. For instance, when you go into a haunted house, make sure you don't panic. The opposite of panic is to stay calm. So here, Tim is saying that this panic monster or freak out monster is what is looking over our procrastinator and helping them get things done. And if you're starting to panic about remembering all the words and phrases from today's video, don't. Just download our free PDF vocab guide with all of this useful information from today's video. The link's in the description.
That the procrastinator has a guardian angel, someone called the panic monster. The panic monster suddenly wakes up anytime a deadline gets too close.
A deadline is a date or time where something needs to be finished. For instance, if your boss asks you to have the report done by Friday, Friday would be your deadline. In business English, it's also common to say target date instead of deadline.
The panic monster suddenly wakes up anytime a deadline gets too close or there's danger of public embarrassment or some other scary consequence.
Public means a group of people or community. For instance, the public school in your town is open to everyone in the community. The opposite would be private. So private schools aren't open to everyone. You have to pay and/or apply to get in. Embarrassment is a feeling of shame, awkwardness, or self-consciousness. We can also turn this into a verb by changing the ending to ing. Embarrassing. We use this when we do something awkward. For instance, falling down the stairs at work is embarrassing, or having food stuck in your teeth is embarrassing. So when you combine the two for public embarrassment, you're emphasizing that the embarrassing thing that you did was in front of people. A consequence is a result or effect of an action, typically something negative. For instance, if you stole something, the consequence would be going to jail. If you're looking for the effect of an action that's more positive, you can simply just say result. For instance, this A on my test was the result of all my hard work and studying. So here, Tim is saying that the panic or freaking out of the monkey doesn't usually happen until you have some sort of bad consequence coming, like public embarrassment or missing a deadline.
Or there's danger of public embarrassment or some other scary consequence. This entire situation with the three characters, this is the procrastinator's system. It's not pretty, but in the end, it works.
A system is a set of things working together to make up something larger. For instance, a school system would be all the schools in the area that work together. Kids start at the elementary school, then on to middle school, and then high school. They are all connected and work together to create the schooling system for the child. Some synonyms for system are structure or organization. Here, Tim is saying that this structure of how a procrastinator's brain functions is not ideal, but because of the deadlines, procrastinators get things done.
This entire situation with the three characters, this is the procrastinator's system. It's not pretty, but in the end, it works. Everything I've talked about today, the examples I've given, they all have deadlines. And when there's deadlines, the effects of procrastination are contained.
Effects are changes that are a result or a consequence of an action. For instance, bad grades are the effect of not working hard, or getting fired is the effect of showing up late to work. A similar word that sounds almost exactly the same is affects, which means to have an effect on or to make a difference. The main difference here is that effect is a noun and affect is a verb. So we'd say your weight is affected by your diet, or your diet has an effect on your weight. Contained is the past tense of contain, which means to control or restrain. For instance, when he said, "I love you," she couldn't contain herself and shouted, "I love you too." Or, if your dog is barking a lot, you should try to contain him.
When there's deadlines, the effects of procrastination are contained because the panic monster gets involved.
Involved is the past tense of involve, which means to cause a person or group to participate or experience an activity or situation. For instance, we should get involved with more volunteering organizations. Or, my parents are so involved in my life. There's another meaning for involved that refers to being in an emotional or romantic relationship with someone. For instance, she told me she was involved with him, meaning they have some sort of romantic or friendly relationship. So here, Tim is saying that procrastinators can be controlled when they have a deadline because they start to panic or freak out. But if they don't have a deadline, it's another story.
Because the panic monster gets involved. But there's a second kind of procrastination, when there is no deadline. So if you want to have a career where you want to be a self-starter,
Self is a person's being that sets them apart from others. We use this a lot to talk about people. Myself, yourself, himself. And starter means a person or thing that begins something. For instance, a fire starter creates a fire. So a self-starter is someone who is really motivated to do something, like get a better job or further their education, without the help of others. If someone calls you a self-starter, it's a compliment. They think you work hard and will be successful because of your ambition. You can also use self to talk about other qualities that you see in yourself or someone else, like self-motivated or self-sufficient, meaning you are motivated or sufficient without the help of others. So if you're a self-starter who's committed to learning English, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos like Learn English with the Hunger Games.
So if you want to have a career where you want to be a self-starter, something in the arts, something entrepreneurial, you're exercising and taking care of your health.
An entrepreneur is someone who operates and organizes a business, usually taking on a high amount of financial risk to do so. We pronounce it as on-tra-pra-neur. The pros of being an entrepreneur is that you're your own boss and you get to do whatever makes you happy and whatever you're passionate about. The cons are that in the beginning it's usually quite hard, costs a lot of money, and there's no stability with salary or working hours. So in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you absolutely have to be a self-starter and be self-motivated. Confidence is key.
Something in the arts, something entrepreneurial. You're exercising and taking care of your health. There's no deadlines on those things at first. All of these non-deadline situations, the panic monster doesn't show up.
Show up means to arrive or turn up somewhere for something. For instance, you can't show up to a wedding without being invited. Or, do you think you'll show up to the meeting? So here, Tim is saying that when there is no deadline, the panic monster doesn't work. There's no fear to make you become productive. You continue to procrastinate because you think you have a lot of time to accomplish something.
All of these non-deadline situations, the panic monster doesn't show up. So the effects of procrastination, they're not contained, they just extend outward forever.
Extend means to spread from a central point to cover a wider area. For instance, let's extend the grass area in our yard. Outward means away from something, and forever means there is no end. So if we extend outward forever, we are just going to continue to spread something away from us with no end in sight. That's what makes being a procrastinator without a deadline hard. When there is nothing forcing you to get something done, you aren't able to set your own deadlines. You think you have all this time to do something, and then all of a sudden, too much time has passed and it's too late.
So the effects of procrastination, they're not contained, they just extend outward forever. And it's this long-term kind of procrastination that's much less visible.
Long-term means extending over or involving a long period of time. We'll dive deeper into this in a little bit. The opposite would be short-term, which means occurring in or relating to a relatively short period of time. Less is a smaller amount of something or not as much. Like, I made less money this month than last month. Or, can you be less dramatic, please? You can also add less as a suffix to words to change their meaning to without. So friendless means without friends, or meaningless means without meaning. When something is visible, you can see it clearly. So for those of us who don't wear glasses, we wake up and everything is visible. But if you wear glasses or contacts, you have to put those on before things become visible. So here, Ted is saying when there's no deadline, regular procrastination turns into long-term procrastination, and it's hard to recognize it.
And it's this long-term kind of procrastination that's much less visible. It's usually suffered quietly and privately.
Suffered is the past tense of suffer, which means to experience something bad or unpleasant. For instance, if you got into a car accident, you might have suffered some terrible injuries. Or, if it's currently happening, you add ing to the end to make it suffering, like I am currently suffering from depression or anxiety. And privately is what we briefly talked about earlier, the opposite of public. So it's by yourself, without people around. So here, Tim is saying when you don't have a deadline, it's harder to identify the fact that you are a procrastinator, and you suffer those consequences by yourself without anyone really knowing.
It's usually suffered quietly and privately, and it can be the source of a huge amount of long-term unhappiness.
Like I mentioned briefly earlier, when something is long-term, it involves a long period of time. A common example of this is a long-term relationship, meaning this relationship has lasted a long time and you are very committed to one another. A common American expression that means the same thing is to be in it for the long haul. So Tim is saying that if you know you're a procrastinator and you don't have a deadline for something, you need to make an extra effort to complete those goals or activities. Otherwise, there's a chance you could become really unhappy for a long time because you feel like you haven't accomplished anything.
And it can be the source of a huge amount of long-term unhappiness. Now, I had a hypothesis that the brains of procrastinators were actually different than the brains of other people. So here's the brain of a non-procrastinator. Now, here's my brain. Both brains have a rational decision maker in them, but the procrastinator's brain also has an instant gratification monkey. So the rational decision maker will make the rational decision to do something productive, but the monkey doesn't like that plan. And he says, actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of the Nancy Kerrigan-Tanya Harding scandal, because I just remembered that happened. The instant gratification monkey does not seem like a guy you want behind the wheel. He lives entirely in the present moment. He only cares about two things: easy and fun. How does the procrastinator ever get himself over here to this blue zone? A less pleasant place, but where really important things happen. That the procrastinator has a guardian angel, someone called the panic monster. The panic monster suddenly wakes up anytime a deadline gets too close or there's danger of public embarrassment or some other scary consequence. This entire situation with the three characters, this is the procrastinator's system. It's not pretty, but in the end, it works. Everything I've talked about today, the examples I've given, they all have deadlines. And when there's deadlines, the effects of procrastination are contained because the panic monster gets involved. But there's a second kind of procrastination, when there is no deadline. So if you want to have a career where you want to be a self-starter, something in the arts, something entrepreneurial, you're exercising and taking care of your health. There's no deadlines on those things at first. All of these non-deadline situations, the panic monster doesn't show up. So the effects of procrastination, they're not contained, they just extend outward forever. And it's this long-term kind of procrastination that's much less visible. It's usually suffered quietly and privately, and it can be the source of a huge amount of long-term unhappiness.
Social media is a common source of procrastination for many people, so let's continue to learn advanced English with Michelle Obama and see why she thinks social media is a waste of time. I'll see you over there.